guys, let's talk about the last part of chapter 11, the last stuff you're ever going to need to know for Bio 1010, and that is speciation. Speciation, what are we talking about with speciation? What is speciation? So a species, you, me, Homo sapiens, species are a group of individual organisms that can interbreed and produce fertile, is a key word, viable, meaning alive, living, offspring. So I produce offspring, yay, but if those offspring aren't fertile, where are we? So we need species that are going to interbreed amongst each other and be able to produce offspring that can then produce offspring of their own. So that's species. Speciation, again, here's that common ancestor for all of the elephants and mastodons and all those guys. That is speciation. Had one guy and we speciated and had all of these other ones after that. That is speciation. So it's not literally like African elephants came directly from this guy and there was no change along the way and there were no other branches. That's not how it works. It's not humans immediately came from gorillas. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. So speciation, branching off, and the branches are going to have branches. That is speciation, where this new group can only interbreed amongst themselves and they can't breed with other things. If they could breed with other things, then both of those things are the same species. Here is our example. A horse can breed with a donkey. It's true, they can. And they produce this super cool animal called the mule, which has great aspects of both. But mules are viable, they are alive, they are a living organism, but they are not fertile. They are not fertile. So it is a hybrid, but it is a sterile hybrid. So you're not going to have a whole population of mules interbreeding and they're going to create little baby mules. That's not how it works. So horses species, different species of horse, different species of donkey. Mule is not going to produce more mules when two mules get together because these hybrids are sterile. Okay, different types of speciation. When you break off and have a new species form, there are two big categories. One of the categories is same homeland and the other is other homeland. And that's literally what this means. Allopatric means other homeland. So you're going someplace else. You're off, on an adventure to someplace new. So allopatric speciation is where a population changes, goes off someplace else. Where are they going? If you have a few members of a species that are going to move to a new place, maybe mom is going to take maybe mama is a bear and she's going to take all of her cubs and they're going to go check out a new set of woods that they've never explored before. That's dispersal. That's dispersal. So a few members of species are going to go off to a brand new place. It's dispersal. You're going to someplace new. Vicariance happens when something comes along and isolates you. So for vicariance, I always talk about where I grew up. I'm from Mobile, Alabama, and I grew up there. And I actually grew up in Daphne across the bay, but there's an island really close by called Dolphin Island. So Dolphin Island is a barrier island right there on Mobile Bay, and it's pretty long. And when Hurricane Katrina hit years and years ago, Hurricane Katrina spun off these tornadoes and storms, and Hurricane Katrina came through and tore off a couple miles off the end of the west end of Dolphin Island. And so if I was a beach mouse hanging out in the sand dunes on the west end, I am now isolated. I could not potentially swim the new channel separating my side of the island versus the other side of the island. So that's vicariance. Something is physically isolated, that population separate from the other. And maybe those two sections will eventually come back together. Maybe they'll always stay apart and maybe we'll have different speciation down the line. But that's vicariance where they're physically isolated. And then we have mentioned before about adaptive radiation. The center of our bullseye is our founder species. And then all of these other guys radiate off of that founder species. That is adaptive radiation. And another animation that we may or may not be able to use because it might have flash. Okay, that was all different homelands. These are things traveling to different places or getting isolated somehow from their compatriots and they are cut off. Sympatric speciation means same homeland. Sim is the same. Sympatric is same homeland. So how does this happen? Well, cichlids are an example. If you've ever seen cichlids in the pet store, cichlids have lots of big, beautiful colors. There's orange ones and blue ones and yellow ones and striped ones. Cichlids are really cool. And a lot of these evolved in the same location, in the same lake. So some of these guys may feed on bugs and some of these guys may feed on different types of plants and bugs or snails or something like that. Maybe some of these are feeding on things that only are located on the bottom of the lake. So there can be speciation within the same homeland. That can happen. That can happen. Other types of same homeland allopatric speciation, sympatric speciation is aneuploidy. If you have the proper number of chromosomes, no matter what organism you are, if you have the proper number of chromosomes, it is euploidy. So I have no idea if I'll have the proper number of chromosomes, but I'm just going to assume that I am euploidy and that I have my 46 chromosomes, my 23 pairs, my mom set and my dad set, and that I have the proper number. I'm assuming because I haven't had myself tested, but I'm assuming so. If I was missing a chromosome, or if I had a monosomy or a trisomy, that is aneuploidy or non-disjunction. Monosomy is where you only have the one, where you should have had two, because anaphase, when those chromosomes were pulling apart, when the sisters were pulling apart, maybe both of them went into one cell and nobody got some in this cell. We may have a monosomy, we may have a trisomy. We talked about Down syndrome and trisomy on the chromosome 21 is a trisomy. So aneuploidy, non-disjunction, is a method of sympatric speciation where you're getting variation. Another type is polyploidy. Polyploidy can be where you have an extra set or sets of chromosomes. These break down into autopolyploidy and allopolyploidy. Auto means self. Auto means self. So you have an extra set of your own chromosomes. You have an extra set of your own chromosomes. So here is my diploid self, my diploid parent. We are diploid dominant lifestyles. This is a diploid parent. And the offspring have the same extra set. We had an extra set of its own chromosomes. So all the chromosomes ended up shifting into one cell instead of splitting off like they're supposed to in mitosis. So this is autopolyploidy. And remember, auto means self. You did it yourself. Another type of polyploidy where you have extra chromosomes is allo. And remember, allo was going to be other polyploidy, allopolyploidy. So in this case, this is two different species coming together to breed. So kind of like the horse and the donkey that we were talking about. We have species number one, except our examples in this textbook, we're talking about plants. Species number one and species number two, they get together. Here's number one's gametes. Here's number two's gametes. And then when they get together, here's their offspring are here. So we have two different species coming together that are going to combine and make a viable offspring, and it has an extra set of chromosomes from those two different guys coming together. So examples of this were wheat, corn, tobacco, different types of plants can do this. This is allopolyploidy. Reproductive isolation. That is going to be the last bit of this section, and then we'll talk about the myths and preconceptions about evolution. Reproductive isolation can come in two types. It's either prezygotic, before the zygote forms, before the sperm and egg are able to get together, there's prezygotic barriers, or they are post-zygotic barriers. So sperm and egg did come together and fuse. In our prezygotic barriers, we may have temporal isolation, different breeding times. It is just now starting to have cricket frogs outside of my basement window at the pond in the backyard. The cricket frogs are starting to sing right now. So they breed really early in the season, as opposed to the bullfrogs and the leopard frogs that'll be breeding later on when it gets much warmer in the season. So temporal isolation is something, the timing of breeding season. Habitat isolation is another one. If they are sort of similar species, but they grow up in different habitats, that could isolate you. If your habitat is not overlapping anymore, habitat isolation is a type of prezygotic barrier that keeps the males and the females from getting together and forming offspring. Another one is behavioral. If you were, example of these are fireflies. If you were one type of firefly and you are the female, and you are this female firefly out there flashing, just flash, 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 just totally just like this boring flash pattern. That's one species. And what if there's another type of firefly out there that's more like an SOS, dot, 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 dash, 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 whatever, and it's a totally different pattern? That's behavior. And so that may keep them from breeding. They won't get together. If you look weird and strange, that's usually a sign that it shouldn't happen. Shouldn't happen. So behavioral isolation can keep these guys from getting together and producing offspring. And then our last one are gametic barriers. The physical parts, the cells cannot get it together. So the girl parts don't meet up with the guy parts. We can't get the gametes together to form, to fertilize, and have a zygote. So all of these are prezygotic barriers, postzygotic barriers. Fertilization has happened. Egg and sperm met up. They have fused. Fertilization has happened, but it didn't make it. It wasn't alive. It didn't make it all the way through gestation. It is inviable. The hybrid is inviable. Or it's like a mule and it forms a viable hybrid. That mule is alive and kicking, literally, but it is sterile. So hybrid sterility and inviability are post zygotic barriers to why something would not continue to go on and survive and form a new species. All right, misconceptions is our last little bit. What are the misconceptions? Evolution is just a theory. It's just a theory. It's not a big deal. So why do we even talk about it? It's a theory that's been tested over and over and over again for a couple hundred years now. So we feel pretty solid about it. And it continues to be tested, and it continues to not only be tested, but it continues to be supported. The evidence supports this theory. So it'd be one thing if we came up with a theory and somebody the next day, did the same experiment, came up with their results, and it was different, then we'd really question if that's truly a theory or just some strange hypothesis. This has been tested over and over and over and over again. It's tested all the time in present day because again, evolution, things are always changing every day. So it is a theory, and it can't be revised, but it's pretty accepted. Um, Individuals evolve. Individuals do not evolve. Individuals don't evolve. Populations evolve. So the genetics that are passed down from one individual to its offspring, that offspring has a genetic pool, and maybe some of those are great traits and they're adaptations, and that helps them be successful. They are healthy. They are um, going to get better access to resources that makes them healthier, that makes them more attractive to find a mate, and they pass on those traits. So a as those individuals pass on their traits to their young and those offspring pass on their traits to their young over time in a population, that's evolution, not an individual itself. It's not the giraffe stretching its neck out, and passing that down. That's not how it works. It's not an individual. Um, Evolution explains the origin of life. No, it's not talking about the origin of life. That's a whole different theory. There's a couple different theories actually on the origin of life. This is just explaining the changes that we're seeing over time in organisms. Is it controversial among scientists? Not so much. Pretty much everybody agrees that it's happening. Actually, 97%, 97% of scientists surveyed believe that some form, yeah, evolution is happening. And other theories should be taught. The only other testable one was Lamarck's, which was, like I said, was a really good theory. It was really pointed in the right direction. It wasn't totally accurate, but it was a good theory for its day. That was the only testable one, and it's been proven that it is not true. We've had natural selection for 100, a while, a really long time. We've been using natural selection theory because we've been testing it, and we proved that Lamarck's doesn't exist, that that's not the answer that we're looking for, and natural selection is the answer that we've been looking for. So that is the theory of the day. That is the theory for the last 100 or so years, is evolution. Again, if it's scientific, it needs to be testable. And even the church is getting on board where we said before in the 1600s with that archbishop that had his theory. Now our current Pope in the Catholic Church, Pope Francis, he's awesome. I love him. Pope Francis himself has been quoted saying, God is not a wizard and that evolution does happen and it's real. So these are the misconceptions. We have covered these. There is a website covering misconceptions. Here is the article with Pope's quote in there. That is it for the material. Please let me know if you go through this, you're doing the study guides, study. The final exam is coming up. The final exam is going to pull 30 questions from exam 3 verbatim. Your 30 questions from those chapters will not be the same 30 questions that somebody else has. It will be 30 random questions pulled from exam three's 75 questions that you just took, and then those 30 questions, the old ones, and then you're going to have 70 questions on all this new content. So chapters 9, 10, and 11 will have 70 questions on those for a total of 100 questions. So it's exactly like the midterm, except it is everything from the midterm forward. So don't stress about having to go all the way back to chapter 1. That's not how the final exam is going to work. The midterm is going to be the final is going to be everything from the midterm forward. So just the second half of the semester's worth of content. It's going to be on this final exam. It counts 20%, so it counts just as much as the midterm does. All y'all are going to be successful. I have faith in you. It's going to happen. Please study hard. Email me with questions. Let me know if you have any questions about this. If you want to go through old test questions, anything, shoot me an email and we will try and work it out. Study, study, study.